Welcome back to the DarkHorse Podcast, number 84. That was a joke. I was not vocalizing. It just looked like I was vocalizing. All right. All right. We are apparently in a silly mood, which could be a good thing or not. We don't know.
We did opt not to have drinks for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's endogenous neurotransmitter drug style stuff.
Yeah. It's nothing exogenous.
Yeah.
Yep. So okay, we're gonna do this. We'll see how it goes. We got tons of great questions. I'd love to try to keep this to an hour just because this has been
It's
quite
late.
a day.
Yes, we had our power failure. However, that happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we heard the transformer blow. It was loud.
It was a loud.
Man, it
yes.
was like it scared one of the cats into the air.
No, my feeling was just that. This was more or less an act of God, and so it raises the question of whether or not capture goes a good bit higher than we'd thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I just accused the deity of being captured by, the
power companies.
Economic. I don't know. I think that, they're caught in the middle. I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't think this was God. I think this was a technical failure.
A technical failure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you think. A short circuit of some kind.
I don't know if transformers can experience short circuits. I just have no idea.
No, something else short circuits them, like something hits the power line and grounds out.
No, I actually don't think it was something exogenous to the transformer because as you pointed out in what you tweeted, it's just like it's a perfect day here. There is actually breezy is nice, so perfect makes it sound like any wind would be not good, but it was like 68 degrees, clear blue skies, no wind at all, just nothing going on that would have caused.
There was really nothing going on.
Yeah, there's just nothing going on. All right, let's do this. We've got 4 questions from last time. Actually, it's been 2 weeks and a lot has happened. I didn't remember. I actually pulled in 12 questions from last time that I really wanted to get to, but we just don't have time. So apologies as always. We got 4 from last time. We got a question from the Discord server, which you can access at either of our Patreons. And then we've got a bunch of questions that came in on Twitter using that hashtag undeterred. I may just go into Twitter to see about getting some more once we finish some of these. But we'll see how this goes. From 2 weeks ago, from episode 83, won't the sudden shift to going maskless indoors result in faster selection for a vaccine-resistant strain? Thank you for all that you do.
I think this is the right style of logic.
Yeah.
I can't say that it will or it won't, but I can say that all of this sense of like either you're unprotected by the vaccine, in which case there's no hope for you, which is obviously not true on the basis that there are alternatives, as we discussed in there.
And there are comorbidities, which just let's may I for a moment?
Sure.
Not related to this, but I was pointing out to you this week, I think, that I read the Oregon Health Authority's newsletter of sort of statistics that come in. I think it's every weekday. Maybe it's only a couple times a week. I should know, but I think I've read every single one of them. And it always says, COVID cases, COVID deaths, numbers hospitalized. And then for whatever deaths in the state of Oregon have happened since the previous newsletter, it gives just a brief précis of like the demographics on that person, how old they were, what county they were in, when they were diagnosed, when they died. And then it always mentions whether or not there were comorbidities. No, what they don't say comorbidities, they say underlying conditions. And I have yet to see a case that says there were no underlying conditions. They almost always say there were underlying conditions. And on occasion, they say underlying conditions are being confirmed. So underlying conditions is the same as comorbidities, I believe. And so just, are you not protected at all if you're not vaccinated and not on ivermectin? No, actually, if you're healthy and young and not obese and don't have any of the other known comorbidities that are, unfortunately highly correlated with bad outcomes from COVID, you are pretty well protected simply by virtue of being whom you are.
Yeah, innate immunity is one effective kind of protection, especially for very young people.
Yeah.
There are pharmaceuticals that appear to work, as the meta-analysis that we were talking about demonstrates. And so anyway, I think the question is a good one, though, which is, It's the binary thinking that had us, not us, but had most people wearing masks outside, which they didn't need to, and was a terrible idea from many perspectives. It's now the binary thinking that has them feeling like if vaccinated, pandemic over. And the fact is, there's a lot of frightening stuff that we need to be thinking about, whether it's antibody dependent enhancement, whether it's the vaccines being very narrowly focused and therefore driving the evolution of escape mutants. And frankly,
and even the dominant narrative is talking about breakthrough cases.
They're talking about breakthrough cases, which is a very important phenomenon, very closely tied to the analysis that Gerd Vandenbusch delivered, and something to be concerned about. And I must tell you, when I saw Dr. Fauci's press conference this week, my sense is they're settling in for an awfully long pandemic. Why is that?
Well, I think what you said was it's really important to some number of people that this pandemic not end.
I must say, it's a thought that is obvious. It's one obvious interpretation. I can't really let myself have it because I feel like, short of the very small number of people who are just truly shameless, that even if someone had the thought that the pandemic was good business, that the recognition of the number of people who are lost and the amount of suffering that this creates
at every level, in every domain,
would force awakeness. And I know that is a naive thought, but nonetheless, I'm not yet ready to go here. But it does seem like people are settling in for a long pandemic, which at the very least, I think means that the powers that be understand that this is not the silver bullet that they have promised us.
Yeah. Wife and I plan to move to the U.S. We are lib-left, but are Portland or Seattle too far gone? Authoritarian woke in schools, work tech, and homelessness. Are blue cities and red states safer? For how long? Thank you. So I'm curious. I just thought this is an interesting question. I don't know where they're moving from. And certainly when I was in Austin a couple weeks ago, and people said to me, I think I said this on air, a few people said to me, liberals said, man, I love living in a liberal city in a conservative state because the tension is there that you need. And part of what we've seen in Portland over this last year has been the failure of that tension to pull some things in a direction that might have made more sense.
Well, it's funny, though. That formulation doesn't quite capture it because Oregon is arguably a conservative state and Portland is a very liberal city.
But our governor's liberal.
Right, because there's only one major city in Oregon. So the point is...
But this is always going to be the case, right? Like by like a landmass, the place where the cows live is conservative. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like,
let's take the obvious example, right? Austin is a liberal town. Texas is a conservative state, but it has, Houston and Dallas, right, and Fort Worth. And so the point is, you need in order to get the benefit of the liberal city and the conservative state, you need the population to actually exert the tension. And in Oregon, we don't have the tension because although the rural parts of the state are fairly conservative,
it's not sufficient. I guess actually that's exactly it. Because I said this exact thing to a woman I was talking with a couple of days ago, and she said, just like here, we live in a conservative state. It's like, it's not though. Yeah. Right, because Portland has such undue influence over the governance of the entire state.
Yeah,
and
so as to the question of whether it's too far gone, I would say that's a very frightening possibility. I am sort of hoping that the absurdity. Yeah, I'm hoping that the absurdity causes an awakening. I think it's unfortunate that awakening has to come in the form of a move towards conservatism, because really I would like it to come in the form of a move towards enlightenment. Right. But nonetheless, these policies are so bad that they will create disaster in short order, and that might have the effect of sobering the place up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, Portland, for all of its problems, is really fabulous.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a great city.
Yeah. What do you think about the reported low death rates in China? Could they really hide it if there were more deaths? Could their immune systems have been prepped by a benign coronavirus release before COVID-19?
There are a lot of possibilities. I think some of them are sort of mundane. But let's just say we have seen some evidence. I'm still trying to figure out whether that evidence is what it appears to be. But in any case, keep your eye on this space, and we will talk about it as we figure out what it means.
Yeah, I actually hadn't put. Yes, okay. So we'll come back. We'll come back to this question. But I mean, I guess to one of the interior parts of the question, though, could they really hide it if there were more deaths? Yeah, I think so, actually. Just as I now wonder how it is that any American, no matter how big their social group, would actually know if case rates of COVID or deaths from COVID were, or, deaths after vaccination, or, any of these things that we really want to know the answers to. How would you know if the numbers were being doctored? I don't think we could. It's just too massive a population, and China is obviously even that much more massive a population.
No, I think unfortunately, it would be fortunate if there were no censorship campaign. The censorship campaign makes it impossible for doctors, for example, to realize that they're all seeing the same thing, and that though each doctor may have 3 anomalies and they can't know what that means, that the sum total of all doctors having those anomalies is a signal of something. And so this is part of what we were talking about in the first part of the live stream here, is that the enforced formal conformity is causing the impression that these things are truer than they are. Mm-hmm. And this is why victims have to be able to find each other. Having Facebook delete groups of people who believe they've been injured by vaccines is incredibly immoral. I mean, for one thing, imagine that you were harmed by a vaccine and you had some new debilitating symptom, and there were others who were in the same situation. You have a right to talk to them about what they're doing that makes it better. You have a right to commiserate with them, even if there's nothing you can do. Being isolated from other people who are in your same situation is just cruel, frankly. And anyway, it is making it hard. It is a deliberate intervention into the sense-making apparatus that would ordinarily come from the fact that people have experiences and they talk about them.
Yeah, that's right. Have you seen? This question, remember, came in before your conversation with Dr. Malone and Mr. Kirsch. Have you seen the Pfizer Japanese biodistribution study? Dr. Bridle said that it shows that the vaccine accumulated in ovaries and other organs of rats. Haven't seen sufficient evidence of fertility effects, but is this especially risky? That was a high dollar amount question that we didn't get to last time. I think you guys pretty well talked about concern. There's real concern about bioaccumulation in the ovaries.
Well, and I've seen, we could steel man the point. It isn't enough to matter, this sort of thing. But what I would say is,
might not be enough to matter.
I'm not saying it isn't enough.
I know,
to matter.
but
I'm saying that I've heard that argument.
Maybe, but
right.
How would you know?
Well, let's put it this way: the fact that we are several times over outside of the design spec of the vaccine, the fact that the spike protein does not seem to stick in the cell surface and turns out to be toxic on its own, that's alarming. That's twice over that this vaccine is poorly designed, right? Wrong protein, not effectively stuck in the cell membrane. And so, even if it was perfectly safe, right? No, it can't be perfectly safe because we don't know the long-term effects. But even if it showed no sign of doing harm that we had seen so far, which is not the case, but even if that were the case, you would still have to say, well, we just got lucky twice. Right?
Yep.
Two things are true, and it doesn't seem to have a consequence. But in this case, the consequence is alarmingly compatible. The harms that we've seen, right? The heart damage and clotting disorders and things are alarmingly similar to some COVID phenomena that appear to be connected to spike protein in isolation.
Yep. Okay, question from the Discord this week is, what is the Steelman argument against ivermectin? And I think there's a number of ways that could be taken, right? Like, what is the Steelman argument against taking ivermectin prophylactically, against using ivermectin as treatment, against discussing it publicly? Like, I can't make a Steelman argument against discussing it publicly. I can't do it.
I would just argue,
but the first two, I think I can.
Right. Yeah. There is no argument against ivermectin. Right. The
Right.
point is, it is a substance.
Right.
Should it be applied? Shouldn't it be applied? We can talk about the various cases.
Nor should scientists ever try to steelman let's not talk about that thing, which is on a list of possible helpful, or explanatory issues. Right. So that possible interpretation, which is not what I think they mean here. I don't think we should even attempt to steelman. But what is the steelman argument against, it being useful and safe, say, as prophylaxis and as treatment, as two potentially separate things.
I want to take the prophylactic one, if that's all right.
That's the one that I have some stuff on, but go for it.
Okay.
I probably you and I are actually going to say some different things.
All right. So what I would say is, because of the way ivermectin is used on label, we don't actually know what the consequence of using it regularly for an extended period of time is, and it is likely to be negative. Is it going to be significantly enough negative to worry about? Probably not. The drug's safety profile is so good that extrapolating from periodic use to regular use is probably not going to result in a significant error. We're probably not going to get surprised, but we could, and that's the problem. Now, the alternative is actually something that has been done in a number of the cases where it's been effective, where it's been used elsewhere, which is the dispensing ivermectin on first symptom, even before tests come back, and to people who are in the same household as somebody who has had their first symptom. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a very strong argument for that, right? You reduce the likely long-term cost of taking a drug, any drug, right? And you get the majority of the benefit. And the only reason I would have hesitancy about that being the best approach mm-hmm. is that there is some evidence of symptom-free cases that do damage. Now, I'm not sure that evidence is going to stand up.
Do damage to the individual who was always asymptomatic.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so my guess is that doesn't stand up all that well, but we don't know. And to the extent that that is possible, what it means is that somebody could get a case, they could get damage, and they would not be triggered to go get the drug. And that is the reason that I would say prophylactic, in spite of the unknowns about the long-term use, is the way to go. But I would love to be persuaded otherwise, because it would be marvelous. I mean, Dr. Corey, in fact, advocates that everybody should have it on hand in the pandemic because, COVID can strike anybody, including vaccinated people. Right. And having it on hand so there's no delay is the way to get the maximum value out of it without paying the price of taking it regularly.
Yeah. I guess I have sort of two arguments against prophylactic, Steele Manning, the argument against prophylactic ivermectin, and one I mentioned in the first hour, which is that I think it is actually true that given that compliance is understood to be difficult for people to take regular things, that the sort of one and done or two and done with the vaccine, you at least know. Right, like you know that number of people have been vaccinated, and if the vaccines do what we're being told they do, then they are protected. You don't have to keep worrying about them. You don't have to keep worrying about whether or not they're doing what they said they were going to do. So that's one reason to, in general, all else being equal, do you prefer vaccine or prophylaxis? You prefer vaccine. I prefer vaccine. I've been waiting for a malaria vaccine for a long time. I've been on a lot of terrible malaria prophylaxis in my life, right? So that's one thing, and then the other is that with the particular. Ivermectin is discovered in Japanese soil in the 1970s, and is somewhat quickly discovered to have anti-helminthic properties, and now it is understood to have anti-inflammatory properties, antiviral properties. One of the mechanisms of action that we understand it to have is that it actually binds to the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. It's got a lot of properties. Right. And one of the things that we now know that we didn't know 50 years ago is that our microbiome is actually a necessary part of a healthy human being. A human individual is not a single thing. We contain multitudes, and we're all of these things. And what else is ivermectin binding to? And thus taking out of the gut, such that maybe your gut health is not as good. You are unlikely to get sick from SARS-CoV-2 or get a worm or scabies or the other things that are on label, and presumably there's a lot of other off-label things that ivermectin would work for too. Anytime you're taking something with that sort of broad spectrum is usually used for antibiotics, but with that sort of a broad effect, you have to assume that it's going to be affecting things also that you want in your body. And so I suspect that there would be long-term gut effects and microbiome problems, and that you would at the very least want to be making sure to be eating a lot of ferment and otherwise taking in your sort of probiotics. But that is one reason, for any drug, I don't want to be on it for very long.
Yep.
And this is my particular concern about ivermectin.
Yeah, I think the fact of its generality also suggests that it's going to necessarily do some things you'd rather it didn't do.
Yeah, it's not only going after the bad stuff, right? Like it doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would also, just as a final point, one thing that is, I actually noticed this in one of the studies that I was looking at that was not very effective. And I looked into the study.
The study finds that ivermectin isn't very effective.
Yeah, and it had two flaws that I saw. One was that it was quite delayed in the course of the disease, and this is going to be a general issue. But the other was that the administration of it it was taken on an empty stomach. Now, this is one of the interesting wrinkles with this drug, is that when you are taking it for a gut parasite, you want to take it without fat, because what you want it to do is be in the gut, right?
And you want it to basically be able to find the thing that you're trying to target with.
Right. You're poisoning your parasite, and so you want it to be where your parasite is. If you are trying to take it to prevent COVID, then you want it to get into your blood, and you want it to cross. And so it's fat soluble, and so it needs to be in a fat in order to cross. So this is one of it's a hazard of the studying it. You can get a study that doesn't show very much effect because
they don't know that one thing.
Well, think about it this way, right? If you're running a study and you're trying to eliminate noise, an empty stomach is a noiseless stomach compared to take it with food, right? So
you had a hamburger, you had peanuts. What did you have, right?
Right. And so, ideally the study would be like an empty stomach, but for some fat, a shot of olive oil or whatever. But the point
that's what we should have had with the Q&A. Shots of olive oil.
And we could have drunk them every time we said, here's the thing, or something.
It's going to be a very slippery studio before we're done.
Could be. Yeah. But anyway, so I think actually I'm proud of our team effort at steel manning this one. I think we've done all right.
Yeah. Okay. These three questions all show up are a little similar. Actually, one of these, the first one is from last episode, and then these next two are all kind of about what legal actions might be possible. So the first is, some universities are requiring vaccinations to return to campus. Can one make a case for being prescribed ivermectin to be equivalent of a vaccination? And if you're denied, is there a possibility for a class action lawsuit? That's one. Two, I felt pressured on my previous job to get the COVID-19 vaccine, but I never gave in. Simply have a bad feeling in my gut about it. Who's going to be held accountable if this goes horribly wrong? Us, because we freely chose to get vaccinated. So there's, who's going to be held accountable? There's the legal question there. And then, is there any chance to make a legal case against the CDC, the WHO, NIH, YouTube, etc.?
Yeah. Don't know.
On any, I don't know the particular answers on any of these, but
legally speaking, I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff going on here, including Section 230 and its implication for
what's that?
It's this provision that immunizes the platforms. Right.
Yeah,
so anyway, there's all sorts of stuff about the legal questions and who is and isn't liable, and obviously the EUAs in their context has an implication for these things. Don't know.
Yeah, but the developers, the R&D, the people who did the R&D on the drugs, on the vaccines, are not liable. I understand. Right.
But
except that, isn't there something where, like, if an employer requires it as a requirement of work, and then if you get sick as a result of the vaccine, then their employer has to deal with your expenses?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And basically, I'm just going to say, don't know on the legal front at all. What I can say is, analytically speaking, everything that I have seen suggests that there is a very strong argument for exemptions from any requirement to get the vaccine on the basis that you are using prophylactic ivermectin, and that could be either of the two plans that we've just described. And the reason for that argument is that A, the apparent effectiveness is right in the ballpark of the vaccines, and that effectiveness is, I believe we already know, but certainly based on mechanism of action, likely to be much broader. That is to say, people who have gotten vaccines may have somewhere in the 90% range, and it varies between the vaccines, but a 90% range of protectiveness from the original variant, but they may have much lower protectiveness against new variants. And so The point is we've got a trade-off. Do you want broader immunity that is arguably lower than the vaccines, though I am not convinced that that's a meaningful distinction, and that if there is a meaningful distinction, that it goes in the vaccine's favor. But nonetheless, the number is high enough. The protectiveness number that we get from this meta-analysis is high enough that, yes, of course, but it does require compliance. It's not as easy to certify as you got the vaccine. Right. It requires your participation. But especially in light of the fact that there are alarming signals that seem to be in the safety data for the vaccines, it is very reasonable for a person to be looking for an alternative, to accept the hazard that comes from using a drug off-label, and that if they are willing to do that is the equivalent from the point of view of protecting the population of the college or whatever. I see it as absolutely comparable, if not better, because of the breadth.
Okay. Most of the questions today are on this general topic, but there are a few that aren't. With your collective knowledge, do you think you could start a homeschooling program to counter the institutions?
I don't really know what that means.
I think it means creating a curriculum that people could employ with their own children.
Like as the exclusive curriculum for those kids? I mean, obviously homeschooling is possible, and I think we would be as good at figuring out how to homeschool as...
No, I think they're asking I don't know, but I read this as not, could we homeschool our children, but could we create a curriculum that others could use to homeschool their children that would counter the garbage that the institutions are throwing at the children these days.
I think the chances of us being able to do it this week are very low because there's just a lot of stuff going on. But
yeah, I mean, I guess yes, but a lot of the power of the way that both you and I learned to educate while we were college professors was about the interaction. And so the curriculum itself is the content is absolutely imperative, but it's also the engagement with and the enthusiasm for uncertainty and serendipity and noise and being outside and being able to sort of on a moment's notice go like, oh, what did you discover? Let's turn that into the lesson we didn't know we were going to have today. And so the parents, the adults doing the homeschooling need to have that openness, but also just have enough experience themselves to be able, not to shut down inquiry that feels irritating to them because they don't know what they're doing, but also just have, somehow gather enough experience, knowledge, such that they can address the questions of children with both enthusiasm and intelligence, and not leave the children thinking questions get me in trouble with my parents, or questions make my parents look bad.
Totally.
All right. I have no idea what the answer to this one is. Who is the most highly qualified scientist or medical practitioner who does not believe ivermectin is an effective prophylactic?
Well, I don't know. My guess is there's some very highly qualified people.
Fauci, presumably.
But the way I'm fond of the point that Dr. Corey makes on this,
okay,
which is who has tried it would declare it non-useful. That's the question, right?
Okay. Yep.
I think it is very easy in light of, if you haven't looked very deeply into it, and you think this is just a rerun of some past discussion about some other molecule that was not that great.
Yeah, it makes me feel Trumpy.
Right. Then I would imagine a lot of people are on the wrong side of this one. But I would like to hear if there are clinicians out there who have actually tried it, done it right, done it early, have a large enough, caseload that they can see an effect. I would love to know if those people have not seen the effect.
Yeah, I agree. What can individuals do to accelerate the succession from established social media platforms to emerging science-friendly platforms? Individuals. Beyond spreading the word. I don't know. I don't know about it like a concerted effort.
Well,
we're so newly sort of in the thick of actually having to do it. I don't know.
Somebody on Twitter posted a reply to one of the things I had tweeted today and said, I think it was me. Maybe they did it to Matt Taibbi. I should have mentioned Matt's pair of interesting articles.
Oh, well, we'll put that in the
we
show
can put
notes.
them in the link in the descriptions. But anyway, somebody posted a question: what can we do about censorship? And this is actually really simple. I know it's not the exact answer to the question. It's not the exact question you've asked, but in the case of censorship, we have an equation, and it's very much like the equation of, the R naught value and herd immunity, right? If you make it your business to take anything substantive that is being censored and broadcast it so that the censor spreads it by doing so, the censorship will stop. And so if we punish YouTube for trying to block sober conversation of difficult stuff, YouTube will either stop or it will go extinct because other platforms will find themselves enabled by YouTube's obliviousness. And either one is fine, right?
Yeah.
If YouTube wants to come to its senses, great. And if it's not going to come to its senses, then, we will be looking at its carcass soon enough. So it's as simple as that in some sense, right? Behave in such a way that the censors can't win, that the scientific stuff that you're interested in gets spread, and we will end up where we need to go one way or the other.
Sounds good. I have a feeling that might be the first time I've seen someone book a haircut appointment on a live stream.
Yeah.
Related. Fun question. I don't know what a question is.
I couldn't tell you.
Fun question for Professor Brett Weinstein. How much hair are you thinking of taking off? Some good hairdressers look after me, but the trouble with curly hair is that it's always hard to say if one is going to come out looking like a poodle. Much love to you both.
Yeah, I got to tell you. Look, I'm just going to be honest with you. I have never figured out what to do with my hair. I've never figured out what to say to the person who's supposed to cut my hair. Frankly, I would love one of those exemptions of those, it's guys really that have crazy hair, but because they're accepted in society that their hair is sort of part of the package.
We call that a Steven Pinker exemption.
It's a Steven Pinker exception, right? There have been a number of these.
Albert Einstein
had one. Why am I forgetting the statistician who debunks bad science? Oh, I'll think of his name at some point. But anyway, there are a number of these people who have a hair exemption, and I don't seem to have one.
Maybe they filed young. Maybe they're better at paperwork than you are.
Maybe they are, or maybe my hair is that much crazier. I don't know. If you know out there in video podcast land, do send word about what the hell I'm supposed to do, because I don't know.
You're ridiculous. I'm a high school student, and I have recently been appointed to a council overseeing DEI curriculum in my district. Where can I find good DEI curriculum not based in critical race theory?
So easy.
Chloe Valdery.
Yeah.
What is it called? What's her program called?
Theory of Enchantment.
Theory of Enchantment. Chloe Valdery, CHLOE VALDARY. She is amazing, and what she does is terrific.
And it's so good and so thoroughly tested that it's not hypothesis of enchantment; it's theory of enchantment, and rightly so.
Okay, can I take a moment to just say I think no, not about that. You're good. I think everything in this room has shifted over, and like the table is not in the normal place. So I keep trying to get closer to you, and I'm blocking that. So like,
you're absolutely in the wrong place.
The table is in the wrong place. Like the table has moved.
The table was moved so that I could get Robert Malone and Stephen
I totally.
Kirsch
But I just
in the shot.
I'm just finally realizing that this is not me. That
no, it's you.
No, it's not. The furniture and the room are not in the same alignment as they always have been before.
The room is not the room, as I have been saying since Evergreen.
The room is the room.
Oh, in this case.
Yes.
But usually it is not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm glad I got it off my chest.
Mm-hmm.
Recommended reading on philosophy of science, someone asks. I guess Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Kuhn, and I never remember what the books by Popper are. But
I inherited a 2-book set during the Game B phenomenon of Popper's.
Of Popper? Yeah, and he's got great titles, and I just never remember what they are because they're bits. Like you can't, at least for me, I can't sit down. Well, I don't read that fast. I don't read a whole book at a sitting anyway. But I don't read like the Popper book, like read bits and pieces. So
right.
Really anything by Popper and Structure of Scientific Revolutions is a short, important book by Thomas Kuhn.
You need one caveat for Popper.
Yeah.
at the beginning, Popper did not understand Darwinism, and he was very anti-adaptation. And he came around later in his life.
Yeah.
But you need to know early versus late Popper matters a lot if your subject is over in the neighborhood of evolution.
Yeah. Yep. Which means that we should really be precise about which Popper we're recommending, and we're not at all.
I'm recommending late Popper.
Late Karl Popper. Okay. We got a couple of asks to reach out to some people who, I'm not going to name who they are, but I'll just say that it's on the agenda. It's happening. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you know. You just don't know who we're talking about yet.
I guess.
What? Yes, you can. What are your thoughts on modern footwear? I spent a lot of time barefoot since COVID and became very aware that most people seem to have shoe-shaped feet. Wouldn't it be rather to have feet-shaped shoes? Much love. God, there's a ton to say on this, and by happenstance, we're actually about to receive some shoes that if they are as awesome as they are reputed to be, then we may be bringing them to you in one of our paid ads in the beginning of some episodes in the future, because we have exactly this concern about footwear. Absolutely, 100%. Shoes are transforming feet and not for the better. And the more time you spend barefoot, I think the more time you spend barefoot outside on the actual ground, probably there are health benefits there that we don't yet understand. More barefoot, more time will lead to better foot health, and better foot health is going to mean better overall health, I think.
Yeah, but really this applies across the board, right?
Of course it does.
It's your eyes, it's your palate, it turns out. If you go back to that, what now seems like a million years ago podcast with Dr. Mike Mew, right? We are just...
It's like less than a year ago.
I know. But the hyper-novelty is wrecking...
What's that?
I said that can't be right.
Yeah, I think it was July of last year.
Yeah, but we are suffering. Our shoes are...
Zach says no.
The patches on your elbows make your elbows weak. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure about that, but
I wasn't listening.
No, you weren't worried.
No, patches on your elbows make your elbows weak.
I mean, probably at a technical level, if you wear them long enough, you probably
the additional chafing probably wears out your elbows sooner.
That would make them stronger.
No, the chafing from having the patches on your elbows is going to your elbows are going to have to work harder. They're going to wear out faster.
Right. But, you mean the joints?
Yeah.
I was talking about the skin, which I think will get calloused. It will become less effective, less flexible. But
I think actually your joints will wear out faster if you have elbow patches.
All right. And you know how to test this?
No.
There's only one way.
Oh, good. Okay.
A large-scale randomized controlled trial. We need $20 million to test this.
Yes, we do. And hey, guess what? We're not at a university, so none of that overhead is going to go to roads or library.
No,
it's going to go to feeding steak to the cats.
It could go to some LEDs for behind the sword of Damocles that hangs.
Yeah, we could put a little bit of that 20 million to LEDs.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. Okay. Discussing the power. Is this where I am? Yes. Discussing the power systems that limit basic science, coupled with the general 1984 theme, makes me think of Robert J. Lifton's 8 criteria of thought reform, which I had not really known. I looked up and they look interesting. So that's Robert J. Lifton's 8 criteria of thought reform. Has scientism replaced science as a tool for milieu control? Yes, absolutely. I think it's going to be 2 weeks hence when we talk about chapter 3. We talk a lot about scientism and how so many people confuse it for science and are using it interchangeably. And that is one of the points. That and reductionism are sort of like these 2 parallel points of like, this is how things that pretend to be science end up gaining power and ruining it for all of us.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and at some level, the thing about science is it's a simple, non-technical method, right? It's a method that is slightly counterintuitive, but there's nothing high-tech about it. And, if you just take the high-tech and you take the trappings of science, it doesn't work. If you, throw out parts of it because they're inconvenient, it doesn't work. You either apply the method or you're not.
I want to take a moment to go back to the altercation we were just involved in.
Were we involved in an altercation?
No, Zach and I were. So, Zach, your position on when the Dr. Mike Mew podcast is based on what you understand about your own orthodontic journey, isn't it?
No, I was joking. I was just saying
Oh.
that the timeline doesn't really line up with anything at all.
Yeah, no, it doesn't seem to, and yet I also think you're right, actually.
I believe I'm wrong, but that's cool if I'm right, I guess.
I love altercations like this.
I was just assuming that you were
Can
right.
people hear you?
Yeah, I turned on my mic.
Excellent. Okay. All right.
Anyway.
Well, damn it, Zach, I think you're right.
I'm staying out of this.
Okay. I agree with the idea that we need more generalists and identify as one to an extent. But what are some paths or actions one could take to become successful as a generalist? What can an autodidact do to gain tenure for something like tenure? Is 8+ years school necessary? Like, absolutely not. It's not necessary. In fact, school is more likely to be neutral or negative than positive in terms of becoming a generalist at this point. Pick up other skills. Like, look at other skills completely outside of the domain that you're engaged in and learn how to do them. Like you mentioned that you built a table. Like, we've got the desk that we built for me back when we were in college, still in the house. Zach's using it now. We've got a bookcase that we built. Like, we learned carpentry. I learned pottery. You learned bike building. We actually have done much of the work on our own homes in terms of tile laying. And there's just any number of domains where, like, take a complete step outside of what it is that you think you're supposed to be doing based on how you identify and what your education is and how you spend your time when you are earning a living, and do something entirely else and see. You may not be able to pinpoint how it affects how you view the particular specialty that you think is your main specialty, but I guarantee you it will. It expands your brain into approaching problems more broadly.
Absolutely.
Do you know, Zach, what kind of time we're at this point?
Yeah, we are at about 43 minutes.
All right. So I'm going to so there's a ton of good questions here, but I'm actually just going to go into Twitter and see if there's more here. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there will be. And I know there's a system, and I'm now breaking the system, but here we go. I should probably start with one that you can answer and then look through for more. Would you discuss pragmatic challenges associated with the mRNA vaccines? 2 challenges I see are that it's impossible to maintain their effectiveness due to the storage problems alone, and it is bad policy to assume a one-size approach for all.
Yeah, I do not think that I'm in a position to talk about this. I can talk about how these ones appear to have failed. I can say that the principle is sound and interesting as far as I can tell, and that it's especially desirable to have the ability to essentially put any protein into production quickly on a platform that works, but damn it, the platform has to work. And
right.
I'm not sure about the formulation of the lipid nanoparticles.
What did you say?
The lipid nanoparticles? What do you think I said?
I thought you said banana particles.
No, there are no banana particles involved as far as I can tell, although they might have worked better in retrospect.
Yeah. Okay. Man, my computer is playing games with me. God, there are a lot of good questions, but so much of them are about just more and more on ivermectin. And I think, we've said what we know at this point, largely. Here you go. What do you think about the Portland Police Rapid Response Riot Team resigning? 50 less police to deal with the nightly protests. Boy, yeah. So you just told me about this last night or this morning. Can you provide any backstory? I don't really know anything. There's like one person.
There was an I don't know the story well. I cannot speak to the incident in question, but one officer, I believe, was charged. I do know something about it. I believe that there was a riot and an officer. The claim is that he hit somebody in the head accidentally, that they were using nightsticks, and that somebody got hit in the head accidentally. Don't know if that's true, but the point was the perception, I think, on the part of the officers was that the mob was effectively dictating that this person who had not intentionally harmed somebody was being treated as if they had, and so they resigned. Now,
En masse.
yes.
50.
Well, but wait a second.
Yep.
They resigned from the riot squad. They did not resign from the police.
Oh, okay.
So my sense
That's less horrifying for Portland.
let's put it this way.
Yeah.
I don't want to take a position on this incident. I don't know anything about it. I
Right.
haven't reviewed the evidence. However, I do know that nationally we've been demonizing our police, that this is insane, that we need police, that this whole defund, abolish, all of this stuff is obvious nonsense.
Yeah.
And I can imagine being a police officer and watching your country suddenly toy with the idea of abolishing your role. And of course, you know what your role is and that's a preposterous bit of nonsense. And at some level, I can imagine being very impatient at this point. And to the extent, so now
it's a hard job and it's a risky job, and
Yes.
now it's a hated job.
right. And the fact is,
And like what
there are bad cops,
Yeah.
but when the country is playing with all cops are bastards, and the municipal authorities are going along with it, of course the good cops are going to be terribly angry, as they should be. And so my sense is,
Yes.
all right, you got 50 people resigning from the riot squad because they don't want to be on the front line if that's the way they're going to be treated. Assuming that the incident is as they see it, then I'm completely supportive of that. And the point is that now brings the city to reckon with the problem that it doesn't have a riot squad because it's not treating its officers honorably. Again, I don't know that I don't know the incident well enough to say that that's true, but I can say in the environment, in the climate where we're demonizing our cops, I could easily imagine that happening, and hopefully it causes the police department and the city to wise up and realize, hey, we actually have to treat these people properly in order to have a force that will protect the city from, frankly, a roving band of rioters who's been at it for much more than a year.
Yep.
Much more than a year? No.
No,
About a year.
since
About a year.
right end of May, right? End of May. Okay. What do you think of the idea that our culture no longer reflects our values? For example, freedom of speech is a foundational American value, but seems to be lost now in our culture.
Yeah, 100%. We've completely lost sight of our values, and we're having the equivalent of an autoimmune reaction against them. And we're going to find out why those values were instantiated the way they were in short order, because civilization just isn't going to work without them. It's going to be a brutal awakening for lots of people who thought they were being clever.
Yep. 7 weeks after the second Pfizer dose, I had a rare heart attack caused by a tear in the lining of my coronary artery. I don't have history of heart issues. I did think, maybe the vaccine? Your thoughts?
Well,
I also would have thought, vaccine?
right. I mean, and especially,
Yeah.
So here's the problem. Spike protein binds ACE2 receptor. There are ACE2 receptors all over your body in various places. This is one of them, right? Circulatory tissue. And so is it plausible that spike tissue could have gotten loose, damaged some cells, and caused a weakness? It is at least, I believe, mechanistically plausible. Does that mean it happened? There's no way to tell in a single case, presumably. But what's really alarming is that there appears to be resistance to figuring out whether this is happening.
Yeah.
Right? We have a social contract issue where the idea is, look, if I'm going to take the vaccine to do my part in order to be part of the herd immunity, then you need to do the follow-up on the vaccine when you get a signal that something has gone wrong, so that at least I know what to worry about.
Right.
That work has to be done. And if you're going to blind yourself to the negative consequences of the vaccine, then we're in a whole different ballgame. And frankly, they're faulting us for talking about the signal that there's something wrong, but they appear to have wildly exceeded the stopping conditions for a new vaccine with respect to a signal of a problem. So
That's right.
they're in breach of social contract, period. The
Yep.
end. You know, what else are you going to do? So yes, I would say you are well within plausibility to worry that may have been the cause.
Yeah.
I don't think, there's no way you could know for sure, but as a working hypothesis, it fits.
Yeah. I do wonder, this person is obviously alive, and I hope you stay alive, but we're beginning to see just a little first glimmers of postmortems showing spike protein in lots of tissues where it's not supposed to be in vaccinated people. And I'll bet mostly those sorts of autopsies aren't even done as people are dying now. And so we won't know. Like we could know. Spike protein, will be visible on autopsy, but for them, if the work isn't done, the evidence disappears.
If you don't look for the evidence, you're not going to find it. And the impression that the evidence is being avoided rather than sought is growing clearer.
Yeah. Have either of you noticed any side effects from your ivermectin use?
I don't think so. I've sort of tried to pay attention to whether or not there's any gut stuff that's different. I couldn't swear that there's nothing, but certainly nothing beyond the most mild, even just like a slight maybe feeling that something is slightly different, but nothing like a symptom,
Yeah, no, I had a few days of gut stuff, but it was 3 weeks in, and it went away. So that's the only thing that I thought maybe that.
Right.
But I mean, of course, there are symptoms of diseases, of drugs, of treatments that you are not necessarily made conscious of by your body.
Yeah.
So that does not mean that we are experiencing side effects.
Yeah, that's true, and it is also true that we are probably hyper aware because we know we're off label, and so one is vigilant to look for the signs.
Yep. What about these hypotheses explaining so many deaths in the VAERS system? More vaccinations at once than ever before, more old people who might die incidentally getting vaccinated than ever before. Nobody thought to submit to VAERS before this high-profile vaccine.
I don't think any of these things end up being compelling explanations. They may explain some portion, but I don't. But for one thing,
the more vaccinations at once than ever before is inconsistent with how many more deaths from just the COVID vaccines than from 30 years of all vaccines combined.
Right. Yeah,
And
I've forgotten the exact comparison, but you're right.
But more. So that doesn't work because those most of those vaccines, every school child gets it, or multiple times, right?
But I think the answer is it is not. I don't think a large number of vaccinations is consistent. The idea that nobody thought to submit these things before, in principle, is capable of explaining such a thing, but it is not in practice likely because, for one thing, we know that there's been an awful lot of pressure not to submit them in this case because there's this belief that getting everybody vaccinated is the key to getting us out of COVID. And so anyway, it does not seem to push in that direction. But you do, I think your thinking is right. You want to figure out whether or not there's some other possible explanation. And from what I've seen, the degree of difference in the safety signal on this set of vaccines is so far off of normal that nothing like a bias towards reporting could possibly explain such a thing. But anyway, I'd be very interested to know. I mean, that'd be a huge relief, frankly, if
that'd be great.
Right. But I would also point out the excess deaths calculation is not sensitive to reporting bias. So,
yep.
Right. So anyway, you got multiple.
But do we know? I mean, are there excess deaths post-vaccination?
Yes.
Okay. What are your most current thoughts on asymptomatic transmission of COVID-19? So we had talked about a paper many episodes ago. I have to look up where we did it. That was really the source paper for all of these media reports of asymptomatic transmission being really, really high. And this was one of the papers that I actually went through very, very carefully and found it to be basically complete garbage. I do not know if there is further work that is now being cited. I have seen no evidence of it, but I haven't done due diligence and tried to figure out if anyone is actually citing better work. Last I checked, which is well over a month ago at this point, that was still the paper when anyone was being when the claim that asymptomatic transmission was a substantial source of COVID transmission, that was the source that was being cited when anyone was being cited. And basically anything that cites that source, in my estimation, is not worth anything. That paper is garbage. I don't know if there's any new evidence.
I would say there is almost certain to be pre-symptomatic transmission.
100%.
If you don't code things right, looks like asymptomatic transmission. But as far as whether there's substantial transmission from people who never show symptoms, I'm doubtful. And as you say, the evidence is compromised.
Yeah.
But maybe there's other evidence.
Yep. I feel like we're probably at about an hour. And although there's a ton of good questions here, given the format, it's hard for me to go through them, and I'm going to find one more for us to finish on.
All right.
How about that? Here we go. In Hungary, the government is fighting the woke agenda and cancel culture by fairly draconian means, including closing a university, censoring media, denying broadcast licenses, and passing restrictive laws. I presume you don't agree with this, but in that case, what can be done?
Well, I'm not familiar with the example.
Yeah, I don't know much about what's going on in Hungary.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is what can be done is a thorny puzzle, because so much of this violates the spirit and oftentimes the letter of our established principles and structures, right? You're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of race, except that suddenly it's become fashionable to do so. It's just in a, new direction. And so anyway, I guess this is a case where until people remember what it is that we discovered and how things used to work and go back to doing it, it's a hard question to answer, because your question sort of presupposes a willingness to do something to solve the problem, but the solution to the problem is don't do this new thing, right? Don't do this new thing. Racism is still wrong, right? So anyway, yes, let's not do this thing, because this thing is bad and it's going to harm everybody.
Yeah. So I lied. There's one more question.
Ooh.
What role can zinc and vitamin D supplementation play in reducing the severity of symptoms of COVID-19? Because zinc, vitamin D, and also vitamin C are on a lot of the protocols, including the one from the FLCCC, including the FLCCC's prophylaxis protocol, which includes ivermectin, and just there are a number of hospital protocols for over a year now that we've been seeing, and zinc and vitamin D, and often vitamin C as well, show up on many, many of them. I don't know mechanism of action off the top of my head, or maybe I never did. I don't remember right now.
I did remember it for vitamin D, but I don't at the moment. I would say there is...
Well, vitamin D, of course, there's like nitric acid distribution stuff. There's a lot of interesting things having to do with greater cardiovascular health with more vitamin D, and greater cardiovascular health just basically moving you out of comorbidity space, such that you're better able to resist. But there's a lot of steps there.
I would say that there is an interesting site. I'm trying to remember. There are two sites and they're linked together. One of them is ivmmeta.com. And then you can get from there to a much more general site, which is the one I was hoping to point to.
You want me to look? You want to look it up?
Yeah. IVM Meta. Okay.
This one?
Yeah. And then
you want Zach to show this? Yeah.
You can show it. And then if you go to the top of the page, you can click on the different tabs.
Oh yeah, I feel like we showed this at one point early. So even hydroxychloroquine's on there.
Yeah, hydroxychloroquine's on there.
And what's I don't even know that one.
But anyway, my point is vitamin D is listed.
Yeah.
And so there it is. You get a summary. This is basically a living meta-analysis that as studies are added, accumulates them.
I think this is not this is not a meta-analysis. This is just a list.
It's
an aggregation.
An aggregator.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although there is some analysis on
some of
these tabs.
Yes.
But it is not a formal meta-analysis in the same sense that the paper we pointed to is.
Exactly.
But anyway, I would poke around there and see what the evidence is for these things.
I don't even know what some of these things are. And always I would, I would be much less interested in getting involved in these newer synthetic molecules.
Sure.
Prefer the stuff that shows up naturally in your food, but you need more of it than normally, maybe in order to help boost whatever response you're going to get. And ivermectin is not that, but it's naturally occurring in the soil and has this, many decades long safety record, as opposed to, for instance, this is a place where actually, I think you too, but I disagree with Steve Kirsch, for instance, the fluvoxamine. I certainly don't want our kids anywhere near fluvoxamine, and I don't want.
Wait. No, so Steve and I talked about this.
Okay.
The point is, if you have COVID,
mm-hmm.
it's worth a brief course, potentially.
The SSRIs are dangerous at any speed.
Well, I agree. On the other hand, so I would prefer to use ivermectin in the case that it's functional, but I think the point is, ivermectin is the only one that has been demonstrated to be prophylactically effective, but having a small arsenal of things. I also wouldn't want to take...
Have it in the arsenal, for sure.
I wouldn't want to take the level of melatonin, as much as melatonin seems to be a comparatively safe drug. At the scale that it is recommended to deal with COVID is like 6 milligrams. It's a huge amount.
Oh, my God.
Right. And so... So my point is, you don't want to do that unless you have to. But if you're sick with COVID and it's about to rampage through your tissues, then being very, 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 very sleepy is maybe a small price.
Yeah, I'd still rather take a ridiculous amount of melatonin than any amount of SSRIs.
Agreed. And I believe that the mechanism of action in this case has to do with platelets. Interestingly.
For melatonin?
No, for fluvoxamine. But anyway.
All right. Well, I think at last we have arrived.
We have arrived at the very end.
The end of our first day of Odyssey live streaming. We thank you again for being with us here and encourage you to join us on either of our Patreons or both of them. You can get access to the Discord server there. You can write to the Dark Horse moderator at darkhorse.moderator@gmail.com for logistical questions. And I'm sure I'm forgetting lots of stuff, but I guess, spread the news, not just about what we're doing here, but also about where we now live. So share this channel as well, and the clips channel. So our amazing clips guy will begin creating clips and putting them to the new channel ASAP.
And I should have said on our mainstream, subscribe to this channel, like this channel, spread it around. That is important. We need to establish a foothold here because the sword of Damocles continues to hang over the Dark Horse. All right. Be well, everyone.